I'm delighted to be here with you, and thank you, Peter, for the introduction.
Sorry about this.
So tonight we're going to get into this discussion about um, our race and religion on the ballot in the United States for 2024. As Peter has already shared, I have a book out on prophetic justice on race, religion, and politics. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, and the book virtually explores the historic context of American democracy and how it has long failed to truly deliver justice for all of America's citizens. And the aim and the focus of the book is to expose the social construct of race and the myriad of false ideologies and identities around it. And so that is what the book is about. It was written between 2016 and 2023 for the update, and it's a collection of essays and articles that touch on some painful subjects, but ultimately I attempt to provide us with a sense of empathy, courage, and faith on how we can come together to face up to some of the injustices of the past and find a way to celebrate our common humanity through creating a new world where everyone's life truly matters. Since the beginning of time, there has been the intersection of belief, values, and religious ideas contributing to the development of societies, cultures, and policies in a commonly agreed upon discourse of Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The idea that the Hebrew prophet Moses becomes this ideal of a deliverer, right? He becomes a leader for his people from Egyptian slavery. And I pose, in looking at this work, that from these three major, if we are allowed to say that, faiths, there's this ideal of capturing this covenant ceremony at Mount Sinai, where Moses comes up with these 10 commandments. I argue that they're not 10 commandments, that they're actually 10 public policies. And that these public policies have created stipulations and ideologies and civil traditions for this community known as Israel, but how it actually unfolds and plays a significant role on life, on religion in the public sphere, and how moral concerns and social ethics are integrated into our world today. All around the world, societies and cultures have nestled with them their belief systems and ideologies that impacts everyday life, often deeply embedded in the rule of law. The Varna caste system in India dominates the Hindu belief about how societies ought to be structured. Uh, the central claim of Nigeria's Yoruba ethnic group is that local and national communication principles are really important in political discourse, as well as in England, the sovereign holds the title of the defender of the faith. So we deal with this idea that religion is really embedded in a lot of what we do and we see and we understand in our societies. The official motto of the United States is "In God We Trust." It places religion firmly at the heart of government. Uh, the Star Spangled Banner, right, with is the national anthem, deals with this idea of "In God We Trust." And there are all of these elements within the United States that is supposedly built around this ideology. Now, it's worth noting, however, that the U.S. Constitution itself is a secular document. It only mentions religion twice, once preventing laws, quote, respecting an establishment of religion and prohibiting the free exercise thereof. and wants to prohibit religious tests for public office. The founding fathers took a clear stance on the separation of church and state and on the importance of religious freedom. But yet, America believes this idea that in God we trust. Also, a part of the complex narrative beyond religion in America is race in America. Within Prophetic Justice, I explore the question of race and set out to understand how this socially, politically charged construct comes about, how we deal with it and how we address it, and certainly addressing the birthing of racism and the resurgence of racism in both the Trump and Obama eras. The concept of race, as we know, was invented as a classification system for human beings with the purpose of creating power and legitimacy for white people, using economic and forms of dehumanization to oppress non-white people. Paul Keevil, in Uprooting Racism, How White People Can Work for Racial Justice, suggests that, and I quote, whiteness is a constant shifting boundary separating those who are entitled to have certain privileges from those whose exploits and vulnerabilities to violence is justified by their not being white. Racism, embedded in a culture and in a society. We know that with race has been constructed, that there are four key factors that have constructed it, and they were thereby creating this racial divide. Religion being at the top of it, social science, pseudoscience, and eugenics. Race, religion, and race interplayed are embedded in American society. However, when we look at this, we have to look at where all of this came from. What is the framing of it? There are some people who left a small island on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean who were sort of something called Puritans, who found their way to some colonies in America to start a New England. And they brought with them certain senses and certain identities. In 1866, though they had left the UK, there was influences. Because in 1866, the Church of England's Frederick Farr lectured on the aptitude of race, which he divided into three groups: savage, semi-civilized, and civilized. At the same time that this is going on, W. Winwood Reade, a sociologist here in England, who was influential in what was happening also in America, said that England and France will rule Africa. Africans will dig the ditches and water the deserts. It will be hard work, and the Africans will probably become extinct. We must learn to look at the result with composure. It illustrates the beneficial law of nature, that the weak must be devoured by the strong. Let that resonate with you for a moment. So, in this creation of America, there becomes this struggle of racial identity, this ideal of a them versus us, a black versus white, with some people being human and others arguably not having a soul, being barbaric, and as far would suggest, being savages. It creates a lot of unrest. And for hundreds of years, there is a challenge and a fight for equality that brings about the American Civil Rights Movement. The Civil Rights Movement, as you know, was a struggle for social justice that took place mainly in the 50s and the 60s for Black Americans to gain equal rights under the law in the United States. So picture this. African Americans, Black people, needed laws around civil rights for them to have equality in America. Some had argued that these people were savages and uncivilized. But ultimately, you ready? Laws had to be created not to make Black people civil, but to make the uncivilized civil towards them. Wow. So the laws were, in fact, created so that Black people could be protected under the law because other people were being uncivil towards them. Incivility, its history, its place in this narrative. What shocked the world, we all know, was the murder of George Floyd in 2020. And I argue that the reason why it became such a global protest against racism and police brutality is because of something called COVID-19. We were all at home. We were in lockdown. And because we were in lockdown, the world paused. We were in a state of pause. And out of that state of pause, everyone saw what happened virtually in real time. But we also understand that this was not a new phenomenon in America. Black and brown bodies have tragically been taken due to the issues of hate for centuries. This is no new phenomenon because there has been this issue with not honoring bodies through lynchings and dismemberments and all sorts of dynamics. So this, in the midst of this narrative, incivility and deeply embedded racism, America's democracy, for some, has been threatened by Donald Trump, who, for some, represents a world that they want and they need. For others, it represents someone who disrespected an electoral process that ignited rage to attack the Capitol with the insurrection of January 6, 2021. America has grown dangerous with polarization and tribalism. And I argue that there are ways forward. In the midst of trying to understand the MAGA movement, is it about pure hate? Is it about racism? Or could it possibly be about something different? Could it be about fear of erasure? Could it be about exclusion? Could it be about the ideology that has long been embedded in the narrative of America, something that was created by W.E.B. Du Bois around the issue of the psychological wage that is commonly known today as white privilege? Where is the opportunity in the midst of all of the narrative of America and all of the challenges that have happened? Where is the opportunity for America to come together with a sense of empathy? Empathy, this antidote, I believe, that allows us to have a space of mutual understanding for another's humanity. What has happened in America is that we have become increasingly more polarized and going into tribes rather than finding ways to come together with democratic and public debate. So, my question becomes, is race and religion on the ballot with everything we're seeing and we're looking at in America? In 21 days, 3 weeks from today, there will be a presidential election. What will be happening in the minds of the individuals who go inside the voting booth, those who are voting now and will vote? What is on the mind of those? Is there the question of whether or not I'm voting for my moral consciousness, from my religious beliefs? Is it really about in God we trust? Or am I concerned about the issues of the state and what matters to democracy and the creation of a constitution and sustaining that constitution? The issues that are in line there, are they going to be looked at and yet polarized? Because deeply embedded in the veneer of America is this ideal of in God we trust. And if that is such the issue, if that is what is on the ballot, what happens to Roe? What happens to Roe v. Wade? Religion played a significant role in overturning Roe, with many religious groups, particularly conservative American Christians, advocating against abortion rights on moral and theological grounds. We certainly understand the conservative majority of the United States Supreme Court ultimately aligned with those views, and the ruling overturned the decision returning abortion rights to state legislatures. Is religion on the ballot when we think about what could happen with marriage equality? Religion has been a central force in opposing marriage equality, with many religious groups arguing that marriage should be between a man and a woman based upon faith traditions. If Donald Trump was to regain the presidency and appoint more conservative justices to the court could eventually revisit this. So I asked again, are race and religion on the ballot? The other issue, takes us back to race. President Donald Trump, posed a question and created the rhetoric when Barack Obama, former President Obama, was running, about who was American, who belonged to America. What did that mean? How do we get beyond that? How do we get to the other side of it? And yet at the same time, when we want to talk about the issues that former President Donald Trump brings to bear, at the same time, within the last few days, former President Barack Obama was found degrading black men for feeling excluded and disengaged. In Prophetic Justice, I try to provide the insight into the role and the value of black men in American democracy. The fact of the matter is that the framers of the American Civil Rights Movement were, in fact, black men who led the way, who created a space for this discourse. What role do they hold in the soul of a nation? So there's a lot of complexity that I argue and that I present as to, is race and religion on the ballot? You want me to answer the question? I say yes. Do you know who else might be concerned about that? It's Pope Francis. On a plane from Asia to Rome in late September, Pope Francis told reporters that he has a problem with both candidates for U.S. president. He said that they were both against life and that Americans should vote for the person they believed in, who was the lesser of two evils. Aristotle articulated this lesser of two evils in 350 BCE, and philosopher Baruch Spinoza wrote about it in 1677. Most people don't really grasp the concept of the lesser of two evils. That's likely because the lesser of two evils is only half of the original concept. The principle states that if given a choice, the lesser of evils and the greater good in both the long term and the short term should be chosen. The problem with the typical American understanding or the general understanding of this concept, the lesser of two evils, leaves out the notion of the greater good. It gets dropped off. Some may argue that considering the greater good is inherent of the lesser of two evils. But the framework demands that people look at a situation from all perspectives. What is the lesser evil, the greater evil, the lesser good, and the greater good, now and in the long term? I suggest that that is what America is up against in the next 21 days. Thank you for your attention.